Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you this morning, wherever you are on this planet. And it's my real pleasure to welcome this morning here, and this very morning where you are, Jonathan. I'd like to welcome Professor Jonathan Day, who is the co-director of performance research at the Royal Conservatoire in Birmingham, as well as the associate professor at the Institute of Transmedia Arts at the Institute of Creative Arts in Birmingham as well. He's also a very accomplished artist. He's a musician, a writer, and an image maker. He has released many musical works, and his most recent album, A Spirit Library, was voted Album of the Year in 2019 by Folk Radio UK, who described it as utterly beautiful. In the world before COVID, he performed internationally, and since then he has been broadcasting in the UK, Holland, Australia, and the US. And I also understand that he's been able to tour physically again in the last 2 months. As a writer, he has published 4 books and many articles. One of his latest publications for Routledge explored the theme of art and terror. And today we get Jonathan out of bed in the early hours of the morning on the west coast of the British Isles. We are bringing the dragon out of his lair, so to speak, to share with us a presentation entitled The Horn Man and the Dragon, Holographic Replication in Musico-Cultural Transitions. So I understand that Jonathan will explore our symposium theme through a philosophical and historical lens, looking at how the globalized world we live in has perhaps turned our traditions into stories we like to tell each other, or even commodities, where claiming ownership of specific ideas has become an irresistible source of profit. The Horn Man, the subject of this talk, appears in many ancient cultures throughout history, many of which had never been in contact with each other before. Therefore, suggesting the idea that perhaps the messages carried through our cultures, both in visual arts and music, probably stem from a much deeper part of our collective subconscious. So Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us at what I believe is 5:30 a.m. in the UK, right?
It is indeed. Let me just start sharing the screen, JD.
Okay.
Okay, we're on desktop 1. Let me just open up the presentation. Where is that? Okay, there we are. Okay, so everyone able to see that okay?
Yes, perfectly, Jonathan.
Okay, great. So that's wonderful. So hello, everyone. It is 5:30 a.m. in my Welsh village. There is only now the very, very slightest touch of pre-dawn. I just went outside to get something. One dog was barking. So the morning hasn't really started for us yet. So I know things have been very busy over in Thailand. I am, of course, desperately devastated not to be physically with you. As JD said, we've been able to start touring again here, and that has been really wonderful. So it's an enormous privilege to be able to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to do that. The piece is titled there, The Horned Man and the Dragon. So let's begin. Hopefully everyone has the ability to join a chat later on. There is a little activity I'd like us to do to ask some questions about some music coming up. So here we go. So holographic replication in musico-cultural transitions, or we could say before we were separate, we were one. We're very separate right now, aren't we? But so I think transition equals change over time, change that happens over time. Tradition rests in the tension between story and dogma. So the ideas that we have, and then there's the principles or the belief systems that we create. Tradition rests within that tension. I think we can conclude that the constant and inevitable transitions happening all the time within tradition, therefore rest heavily on story. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where we come from, where we're going. You'll recognize I'm quoting from a famous painting there. The stories about our identity as people and as groups of people. We might call ourselves nations, hierarchies, language groups, histories. We might even use this strange term, artists. So the stories also that tell us what music is, who owns music, and even sometimes who's allowed to make it, who's allowed to make music. Perhaps the most strident and pressing change in most of our stories worldwide is this thunderclash of globalization. And fascinatingly, as we approach the post-pandemic, we have rumors of retrenchment and renewed regionalism. The idea that we won't be buying so much from each other, we won't be trading so much, we won't be traveling so much. We start to look to our own region again. So this renewed regionalism. Already, I think, perhaps in this chat that I'm doing now, can you see or feel this sense of pulse? Regionalism, globalization, regionalism. We could also call it a rhythm, of course. Regionalized, globalized, re-regionalized. So given this rhythm, perhaps it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that our recent and remembered regionalism, the regionalism we knew before this current wave of globalization, appears to have grown out of what I'm going to call a paleological globalization, or some sort of ancient global interaction that goes before the thing that we remember as regionalism. So I guess the question really for listeners is, even if this is true, you may wonder why and how does it matter to you? Why would this ancient globalization, if it's true, matter? Well, I think that if we were, our ancestors were, culturally at least, unified and inverted commas one in the past, before we broke off into nations and regions, there's a very good chance that with some work on our parts, we might be able to be one again, unified and collaborative in all our variety, unified as human beings and hopefully working together. So given the current situation within the world, the things that we see, a quotation, wars and rumors of wars, etc. Given the way that the world is right now, I believe that's important. So let's try to see if it might be true. I think one of the greatest underlying drivers in all of this is the homogeneity of humanity, the link, similarity, and kinship of all humans. Scientist Musico Sforza and others demonstrated that amongst the 7 billion or so living humans, we've so far demonstrated less genetic diversity than exists in one troop of chimpanzees. In other words, we all have an extreme family likeness. One scientist said that to other species, we all appear to be clones of each other. So an extreme family likeness and our shared genesis, the start of people, at today's best estimate, seems to be in a series of caves on the South African Cape, from which we spread rapidly along the littoral margins to populate the planet. So we spread along the coasts out from there, and that's why the spread seems to have happened relatively quickly. So it appears that we all come from a similar place. Now, this is the science bit. So I'm going to leave it there for a minute. This is naming the various scientists, the statistics that they're using, the sizes of their samples. I'm not going to read it all. I'm going to think that perhaps you might believe me, but just in case you don't, there's lots of information there. Just enough time for the recording to see that. And if you want to screen grab it, that's your chance. And I'm going to do that again here. This notion of the very limited number of progenitors and the work that was done on that. So leave that for a second rather than to throw too much science into all of this. Okay, so given this commonality, it's perhaps unsurprising that a number of mysterious replications and overlaps exist within early human cultural outputs. So things that exist across lots and lots of very geographically remote cultures. One of the really fascinating things is it also exists across time. So when we're looking at this, the traces left by ancient people are few, far between, and partial in the extreme. Some things survive, most things don't. So we have to go on the little bits of evidence that we have. They might be scratches on rock, a smear or a pattern of ochre, iron oxide, silicate, or soot. It could be a bone flute, a carved image of a Babylonian harp, the outlines in darkened soil of a Saxon hierarchy, an instrument I have in a cupboard just over there, or it could be a bronze horn, the things that are left over. So in the short time we have, I'd like to start with some images, if that's okay, and then move on to some music. Obviously, the way in which music exists and lasts through all that time is different to the visual. So let's start with our titular subject, the horned man. So there we are. I am now one, a horned man. The horned man is an example, and interestingly occurs constantly in cultures that have seemingly little or no possible contact with each other across time and space. So let me show you some pictures quickly to see if I can persuade you. Starting off with Kenonos, a Celtic god, and the Indus yogi seal. These demonstrate hybridity, parallelism, and influence. So hopefully you can see this little character. It's a seal, possibly for trading, from Mohenjo-Daro, a city in the Indus Valley, from sometime around 2350 BCE down to 2000. Look at the character. You have some, perhaps a character with three faces, tricephalic, wearing a horny headdress, surrounded by animals, sitting in a lotus position on a little stool. Fantastic little piece, I think, beautifully designed. There is some argument whether this represents a proto-Shiva, because it appears that there may be an erect phallus. That's debated amongst archaeologists and art historians as to whether that's an ornament on the belt. It could be either, couldn't it? So a lion, a tiger, etc. So there we are. That's that character. And then I want to compare that to this. This is the Gundasrup cauldron from Denmark, 150 to 1 BC. So you can see 2,000 years difference between them. In the background there's a little character which we're going to focus on. Here he is, this cross-legged man holding an enormous snake, also horned. So 2,000 years and what, 7,000 miles between these two pieces. And yet we have something similar happening between them. Gorgeous piece of work, I think. Look at the position of the antelope, the deer, this strange dog or wolf-like creature. And above the wolf is what appears to be a tiger. Isn't that strange? A piece made in Northern Europe, a gigantic snake and a tiger, and a man riding on what looks like a seal or a walrus. So the point I really want to make is that it appears to be that there is some sort of replication between those images. There's some sort of communication going on between the ancient Indus Valley. Something about that icon carried. The image on the cauldron also incorporates what we call vanquishing Kalia from the Indian tradition. This is usually Krishna, who is standing on the snake and holding either the tail or the head in his hand. So I find this really remarkable, this replication across time. Here are some more images of that. Okay, well, maybe I've got your interest. I hope so. There are lots of other horned men, and let's have a look. We can play some games in the good sense, hopefully. So what do you think of this one? You don't need to answer me on the chat yet. I will ask you some things on chat at some point, but not quite yet. So this horn man, well, it's from the Cherokee peoples. This is a museum I was at in a Cherokee homeland in the US. So the horn men. This one is from Patagonia. So the same, well, it's just about the same continent, North and South America. This horn man is from the Trois Frères, the Three Brothers Cave in Ariège in France. I hope that two things are coming over. This is a joke. I couldn't resist it. That's Michael Flatley, the Irish dancer. He is a more genuine one. I think that it's really hard to say where these are from. Throughout, though they're global, they all have some sort of kinship, which is ultimately my point. This is from the Anasazi, ancient people in the southwest of the USA. A one-antlered person here, maybe a side view. This is from Lost Canyon, USA. A beautiful piece, I think this one is. And this is Barrier Canyon style from Emery County in Utah. Another Anasazi. Sorry, this is a Utah, not an Anasazi, from 9 Mile Canyon. Okay, so this one, where might you think this horn man comes from? Well, it's from Niger in Africa, yet it is incredibly similar. This one is our character with horns that we were just looking at, holding a snake, appearing once again. So is it going to be Denmark? Is it going to be India? It's Utah in the USA. So I hope you are with me on this. I love this little guy. Also Anasazi. They have some phenomenal petroglyphs. It's because it's dry where they lived, so things were able to survive. The so-called rainbow man has very little horns. Barrier Canyon style, Utah. Another antlered one, Cedar Canyon. Why? Well, that's a great question, and there is some insight to that. This is from about 5,000 years ago from the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa, and it's an eland antelope head on a human being, and it's a shaman who's transformed. You can see a very tight cinched waist there. The shaman is holding the tail of the dying eland antelope, one of the prime food sources for this people. And the representation of the horn man may well be, it's posited by a scientist called Lewis Clark Williams, that the transformation of the shaman into the spirit of the animal, knowing about the animal, is what's being represented with horned men. And here's this very funky transformed shaman with the eland head, also from the Drakensberg. Okay, so, one thing is not enough, two things are not enough if we're going to demonstrate this cross-cultural link. So a few more visual ones before we move on to some musical ones. I hope that's okay with everyone. Iconography, pictures are shared between Lasso in France, a cave system there, and the Drakensberg in the Karoo Desert. How? Why? There's clearly a mechanism, but what was it? We don't know. So this is about 19,000 years old in carbon dating, but these sites were revisited across generations. Very, very beautiful paintings, I think, in these underground caves. These are pictures of this entrance hall, the Hall of the Bulls in France, in the Dordogne. Another view of that. I think they're astonishing, aren't they? Really beautiful things. A horse. You see the style that's happening here, horses and bulls overlaid on each other. Gorgeous things. So here we have the Sand People in Transkei, an enormous continent away, the Drakensberg Mountains again. And this is 5,000 years old. So a huge gulf in time and distance. And yet, do you see it? Do you see how similar this sense of style is? I find this really incredibly intriguing. So two more of those shaman, transformed shaman. Lots of antelope, the eland, the food stuff. So of course you don't see eland antelopes in the lasso one, but the depiction is so similar. There's so much resonance across those two. So I'm going to throw in this one and ask you, just, you know, as a rhetorical question, I'm not asking you to answer this on the chat, where you think this might be from. Well, of course, the answer is neither. It's from another system, remote geographically from those. And this is painted between 34 and 14,000 years ago by generations and generations and generations. And this is that system, remarkably similar. It's a bull there, another bull. Lots of different images, just because, you know, I'm presenting you with evidence. What you do with it, if anything, is of course up to you. But I want to try to make the point for these connections. Okay, the hornman and the dragon. I'm not going to talk too massively about dragons because we have dragons on Saturday in our show. But this is one of our characters in the show. His name is Quetzalcoatl, which you might recognize as a Mexican name. And it combines lots of things because if you can see well enough, it's actually a little palm frond woven dragon that I bought when I was with you some time back. And he's a feathered serpent in the Aztec story. So I've just stuck loads of feathers on him. And we have a whole puppet drama coming up. So a Chinese dragon turned into a Mexican dragon. And of course, he's in Wales. So technically, he's also a Welsh dragon. So let's have a look. This is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a very positive character in Aztec mythology, a savior character, actually, in some senses, who saves the people when the world is destroyed by his evil sorcerer brother, Tezcatlipoca. So here he is. Very dragon-like. So I guess the question is why? This is Kukulkan, the southern Mexican name for the same character in the Mayan myths. This is at the Templo Mayor, the Mayan one. This is an Aztec representation from one of their books, their codices. So we have the dragon in Mexico with no apparent connection at the time that we know of to China. Really similar. Astonishingly similar. I mean, often, as you can see here, as with the feathered serpent, the Chinese dragon also doesn't have great big wings. So there's a commonality there. Lovely image, I think that is, of the Chinese dragon. And of course, the illuminating ones. And yeah, I miss all of this so much. We don't so much have this lantern tradition here. Now, these are drawn by my friend. Dragons are very powerful in Wales. Obviously, for those people who've been here and you've seen the flag, it's very significant. This is by my friend Catherine Suter, who illustrates stories. Storytellers who make books, she does illustrations for them. So these are some of the famous Welsh red dragon with a Welsh castle. This is exactly what it's like where I live, except we don't see that dragon every day. This is one of hers, a green dragon. So here's the Welsh flag, the red dragon on white and green, the green hills and the, of course, grey sky because of the weather. So this is an interview now with someone I spoke to a couple of days ago called William Parsons, who will tell you about his belief that the last living dragon in the UK is still in Wales. So I'm going to make sure share sound is on. So hello, I'm here in mid Wales, a centre of real interest for dragons, with William Parsons, creator of the British Pilgrimage Trust and wayfaringbritain.com. So could you tell us a little bit about the dragons and the lore and legend of dragons in this area?
So legend says, Jonathan, that we have one remaining living dragon of Wales, and of Wales we mean all of Britain, and that is here in the Radnor Forest area, and it's surrounded and kept asleep by 7 Michael, Saint Michael on the hill churches. Michael depicted with a lance through the dragon, pinning it to the ground. And so this dragon is kept asleep here. And the legend also says that if one of these churches falls, the dragon will awaken. Is this the Welsh national identity? Is this some earth magic from, like the Chinese feng shui tradition? Or is this a religious or cultural, tribal sort of story about the dragon people who came before the Christians? We don't know. But people here have a sense of there being something right on the edge of happening all the time, and that's Mid Wales. Welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, so I was talking to Will just a couple of days ago, and that sense of the reality of the dragon is really interesting in that area. It's called Llandegli, if anyone ever goes there, a beautiful place. And we were filming the shadow play that we're going to present for you on Saturday, along with lots of fascinating works by other colleagues. So there's a sense that there's a real dragon in the ground, and the mountain ridge there looks very dragon-like, and it's called Cefn y Ddraig in Welsh, which means the dragon's back, or the dragon's ridge. So it overlaps with ideas that we see in cultures globally. The people of Australia, for example, who believe in ancestors who sleep underground. Okay, just maybe another very quickly. It's fascinating that planetary anthropomorphisms, in other words, the characters that live within planets, are shared by Greek and Chinese culture. And despite intense study, there's no really agreed mechanism for how those ideas were shared. Someone I spoke to a while back, Leela Russell-Smith, spent many years examining the possible explanations for the reasons that Chinese and Greek planetary characters are the same. She concluded there's no certain answer and thought that maybe there was a common parent culture, which left no trace. Jeffrey Kotick from Leiden University in the Netherlands developed that argument with his piece in 2017 in the Journal of Chinese Buddhist Studies, talking about the astrological iconography of planetary deities in China. He thinks that maybe there was a drift from India and Mesopotamia through a practice in Buddhist temples called Occidental astrology. So he thinks that that might be the process. And I'm not arguing for, some people would say, oh, there were ancient aliens or this kind of thing. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is the overlap of things is fascinating and important, and I think it suggests a time in which we were more unified than perhaps for some of the centuries leading up to now. Okay, so just some images. Again, who you think this might be. I think it's pretty quickly obvious that this is the sun. Sorry, of course, it's Apollo in Greek drama. So there is Apollo, or this could be Apollo, or this might be Apollo. With the horses, we could look at the way in which the sun is depicted on the chariot. It's fairly obvious that that would happen, wouldn't it, across the world? Or we could think about who this is, the scribe, the writer, or perhaps the messenger. And that, of course, is Mercury in Greek and Roman planetary. This one, fairly obviously Venus, goddess of love, sometimes of beauty, of music. There. This one, god of war, has to be Mars, doesn't it? This is various Chinese representations, a Greek one, and I love this guy, staring eyes. It's scary enough without anything else. This one, of course, Saturn, the old man, and here is the Saturn, sometimes also Kronos. So music, moving on then, essentially, of course, because we're here mostly for music, aren't we? And that's a wonderful thing. Music just isn't recorded, or it doesn't survive in the same way. So we have to take a slightly different approach, I think. Musical themes, moods, and instrumental regimes similarly pop up across apparently entirely dissociated cultural moments. And in my time of travel and study, I've always been astonished by how the instrumental regimes of places, though the instruments vary incredibly, often make very similar sounds. So I'd like to, well, that's something that we discussed previously last time I was at PG Vim, so we won't go too much into that. But the traces left by music, very different to the visual ones. So to finish off then, I'd like to play a game, if that's okay with you, experimentally. And hopefully I want to demonstrate the intercommunication by asking you a couple of questions. And then we've got the chat to help with this. So I'm going to open that chat window up. JD, maybe you could just say hi on the chat, just so that I know that it's going to work.
Okay, well, we have the chat and then we have the Q&A as well. So we have two spaces.
Okay, so if people are, I was thinking if people don't want to speak, they can write into chat, and there it is. Hi. So this is only going to work if you join in. Otherwise, you'll be listening to some beautiful clips of music, and then I'll tell you about them, which is also fun, I think, at least for me. So here we go. So what I'd love you to do is to listen to these short excerpts. None of them are more than a minute and a half or so. And I want to ask two questions. What is this music for? It's a strange question, I know. I just want you to give a gut reaction. What do you think the point of the music was? And then the second question, where is the music from? Where do you think this music comes from? So experimental, globalized, interactive work now. Okay, so here we go. What is it for and where's it from? I think Asia's too general, Anatai. Okay, wonderful. We've got some great responses. Okay, so yeah, actually you've done really, really well. Anatai's, I think, is a little general. The whole of Asia, that's an enormous place. But yes, it's court music from Nara, which also, Nara in Japan, so also very much used ceremonially too. We have from Miko, Northern China, Korea, or Japan. Yeah, something ceremonial. We've got the instruments from Hiroko, Nagai, Sho, and Hichiriki, and Anatai. Haha. So yeah, great. So yeah, a good sense. There's sort of, it's Asia, it's East Asia. That's wonderful. Okay, so ceremonial. I love from Dawn. Sounds like a song for nighttime camping around the fire. Okay, let's try another one then. Same idea. Just dive in. There's, you know, it's not like you're going to get points for having a go. So have a listen to the next one. on this one? What's it for? Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. That's brilliant, because of course it's what I thought you would respond with, and it is. So European folk song, it's from Romania, it's a tavern, Turkey or Hungary, it's a wedding, Eastern European festive music, Arabian, testing shoes, I like it, from Jean David, Hungary, fiddle and accordion, Eastern Europe, yeah, Turkish dance. So the kind of thing that I want to get over is, you know, we're all pretty specialists on music here, and we're actually doing way better than most people who I've asked with this quiz before. But even so, we're not able to be absolutely certain of it's here or it's there. There's a commonality that exists. What strikes me, I don't know if you'll agree by the end of this, and if you don't, that's fine, because it's an experiment. We have to take the experiment and its results and be straight and honest with it. My feeling is that we can be more certain about what music is for than we can be about where it's from. So let me put that thought with you, and feel free to respond in the comments if you want to. We can be more certain about what it's for than where it's from. Okay, let's try. We've got another couple. Let's try this one. Same questions. Have a go.
Zoali mache, limache, limache. Zoali mache, limache, limache. Koali mache, limache, limache. Koali mache, koali mache, la vie non me mon Dieu. Koa mache non, la vie non me mon Dieu. Zoa mache non, la vie non me mon Dieu. Abolizad badia, ongasiye. Isadorezo. Abolizad badia, ongasiye. Isadorezo. Abolizad badia, ongasiye. Isadorezo. Zo, 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 zo.
Less attempts with this one. Less people having a go. So what's it for specifically, do you think? Okay, excellent. Okay, so it's voodoo music. It's a spiritual music in terms of, it can be worship of the syncretic deities of voodoo, the African deities that came over, and because of the horrible crimes of slavery, people had to add in their deities to usually Catholic names of gods. So news reports saying hello. Yeah, excellent. So we've got communal religious music, African tribal music, sports, cheering. Lots of people think Africa, which is of course natural, since people were taken sadly against their will from Africa to Haiti. There's a nice little message there advertising the next session coming up soon from 2 till 5. So have a look at that too. Okay, we're almost there. Let's see if people can grab onto this next one. I have emphasized particular regions in the belief that people will get them more easily. Dive in. We've only got a couple more. Give it a go. What's this one for? Where do you think it's from? So we've got the purpose of it, but not a location for this one from anyone. Okay, so yeah, it's essentially Tibetan, but it's from India. It's from the a place called Ladakh, and generally we're starting to see people saying what it's for more quickly than where it's from. Some great guesses, but someone departing the world, so a funeral piece. Okay, very quickly then. See if you can do a snap one on this. Come on, have a go. Where do you think it's from? Great, we've got a couple of ideas coming in. And what's it for? So maybe I'm wearing you out now, but thanks to those people who had a go, or maybe it's just more difficult. So we have on this one, we have a guess that we have 15 more minutes. No, I'm joking. So we have a guess that it's Scotland, Eastern Europe and Turkey from Anatai, a circus performance, someone's guessing Ireland, Anatai again, the arrival of an important day. So it's clearly a festival celebration music, isn't it? It could be for circus, certainly. It could be a hello, a welcome music. And it's from Ladakh, the same place in the very northern parts of India in the Himalaya. So what I'm trying to get over is this idea that as humans, we know that music is music, wherever it's from. Has anyone felt in any way divorced, separate, excluded by any of the music that I've played? So if I was, if someone's listening here who has English as a second or third or fourth language, there might be a degree of exclusion happening because of language. If this was in, I did a piece of work a year or two ago using languages that are extinct now. So no one speaks them anymore. And there's a thing in language that excludes people. I don't think that is true for music. So I'm interested whether anyone feels that they're left out by any of this music, or whether they feel that they're included. And we've all had very good attempts at what this music that perhaps never heard before is for. It communicates across that. Okay, so I think this is the last one to finish off. So come on, make me proud, everyone, and dive in. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong clip. Excuse me on that. So that should have been Fong Nam. So that might be here. Okay, let's do this one. This really is the last one now. Sorry for that. The same questions. What's it for and where is it from? Last chance to have a go. I sound like a fairground man. Okay, so wonderful. Thank you so much. That's really, really great. Anatai nailed it instantly. Fantastic. Well done. Stone bells, thousands of years ago, ritual East Asia. Exactly right. Interesting from Miko to tell a time of day, a composition, southern China, from somewhere in Scandinavia, maybe. Gamelan is another one from Hiroko. Like time music sounds strangely familiar. Isn't that great? Thank you so much for those comments. And this is, excuse my terrible pronunciation, Zhu Ziqi. And I actually went to this tomb, which is in Guangdong, of Marquis Yi of the Zheng state in Hubei, and I bought a recording of the instrument. So tragically for the orchestra concerned, they were buried alive with the Marquis. When he died, he took his orchestra with him to the next world, along with his wives and many of his servants. He was the only one dead at the beginning of the process. And all of the instruments were buried. They're then reconstructed and sounds recorded. But I love your responses there. I mean, it could be Scandinavia, couldn't it? If anyone's heard of Iceman Is by Terje Isungset, which is a percussion-based series of compositions using instruments made from ice, recorded in a recording studio carved into a glacier that eventually fell into the sea. It's a fantastic project, and it sounds really, really like this. So yeah, Scandinavia, I think, right? Could be gamelan, it could be Thai. I love that final comment. It sounds strangely familiar. And I think that is the point. It is familiar to us because this is stuff that people get and shape and mold and hit and blow and press and twang. And from it comes sound, comes music. And we're all human, whether it's from, 2,500 years ago or 8,000 years ago with the bone flutes. I played lots of that on the last session, so I haven't brought recordings of those ancient instruments this time. Okay, so the final conclusion, which I thought I'd put here in terms of a whole large piece of text. I'm just going to move myself off to the side a bit so that I can see that better. And the result of that is I'm going to have to recall up the presentation. There we are. So the evidence of some kind of Paleolithic cultural globalization, I think, allows for a significant rereading of ideas around cultural patrimony. Now, I hate to gender things because that is in itself an act of patrimony or patriarchy. But unfortunately, if you take patrimony and try to make it female, it becomes matrimony, which means marriage. So I couldn't use that. So I hope you'll excuse me sticking with this word patrimony. So yeah, Paleolithic cultural globalization allows for a significant rereading of ideas around cultural patrimony. There are, in the visual arts particularly, contemporary acts of claiming ownership of cultural traditions. The Iroquois, for example, have asked that every false face mask from the Iroquois culture is returned to them and no one ever looks at them again, because they are incredibly spiritually powerful within Iroquois tradition. And I've looked at many, and they are stunningly revealing about the human condition. And the question we have to ask is, would we be impoverished if we prevent each other from looking at our work? I think that's something each of us has to decide. So this ownership claiming within music and cultural traditions, I think, is certainly based on innate human inclination to claim territory. And that's common to many large predators. We need to live, so we think we need this territory in order to have enough food to survive, and everyone else can keep away. But it also has this aroma for me of high capitalism, the stink of profit and the stench of money. And this is not an innate human inclination. It's within us, of course it is. But not everybody does that. Thank goodness for that. Marx would call this attempt to own things ownership of the means of production, an attempt to bring it in and keep it for yourself. So this claiming and exclusivity has happened already in visual arts. It might be something of an act of location within our own story of ourself and a socially attributed story. You know, this is something that makes me me. This music, whether it's hip hop, grunge, or a traditional music, is the thing which makes me me. And I know for me, as a rather lost young person in an industrial wasteland, finding music that is from my own cultural ancestors within the Celtic tradition was an incredibly powerful, enabling, and actually almost an act of salvation. So the music might come from these self and socially attributed stories where we examine ourselves within that. But I think being able to look at our common, interrelated, and codependent cultural roots across the great experience of humanity allows us to open windows to celebrate our co-ownership as humans of visual culture and music. And it's also a powerful platform for us to personally and collectively expand and grow. It seems to me, across the years that I've been involved, for which I am honestly beyond grateful, to be at the heart of the PGVIM and PGVIS mission. As traditions transition, we can choose to isolate, to regionalize, to exclude, and to possess. Or we can together celebrate and explore ourselves by celebrating and exploring each other. Not as tourists, and we have the idea of Orientalism, the West looking and taking what it wants from Eastern culture, Orientalism, or Occidentalism, in which the East may look and take bits from the West. So not as tourists or voyeurs, but as humans, as fellow human beings. And that fantastic final comment in the chat, that it seems somehow familiar, kind of sums that up so well. I think, and if I'm speaking personally, which is at the end of the day really all that I've got, we become more realized, more whole by opening up and exploring those aspects of ourselves that we first find in others. By exploring and indwelling the music of the ancestors, all of the ancestors, who in the end seem to have talked to each other one way or another. By exploring and indwelling the music of the ancestors, we are better fitted for the challenges of today. Thank you so much to everyone who has listened. It's a real privilege to be able to speak. Thank you, Jean-David.
Thank you,
Over
Jonathan.
to you.
I can hear people clapping from their bedrooms and living rooms. Thank you so much for responding to our invitation of the exploration of traditions by inviting us to zoom out into our not so distant past to remind us that there is probably an interconnection between the DNA of all this cultural expression that have evolved over time. And as you mentioned before, I really think Dawn nailed the dragon on the horn with this comment here. It does sound strangely familiar, and I think for most musicians, this familiarity or this discovery of things that resonate within us at a very deep level is definitely something we all need to explore. I was wondering if we had time. We probably have time for a few questions. So if you want to ask Jonathan anything or even add your own comment, I guess you can raise your virtual hand and we can let you in. I have myself to remember how this works. Or you can also type your comments and questions in the chat we were just using earlier. Well, I guess, Jonathan, you left everyone in a rather reflective...
I think we're quite close to the end of time as well, and I can see that Anatai has, it may not be Anatai, someone, PGVIM staff, has posted up the next sessions coming up.
Okay, and I guess people will need a
2 till 5
break as well. So please check the website, of course, to follow the next events and the schedule, or you can look for announcements as well on our Facebook page. If you want to explore the world of Jonathan a bit further, there will be a puppet performance, which I'm waiting to see as well. I'm really looking forward to your video this Saturday.
Yeah, thanks.
For the closing,
it went very well. Yeah, we recorded it in exactly where that dragon is supposed to be nailed to the floor by these St. Michael churches over the weekend, and I was really happy with how it worked out. So yeah, lots of dragons and horned men.
The pictures look very, very promising. The ones you sent me this morning. So anyway,
Good,
this will be at 7 p.m. This Friday, 27th, where we'll have a series of performance pieces illustrating the theme of transition and tradition. So thank you very much again, Jonathan, for waking up so early
I'm going
in the
back
middle
to
of the
sleep
night.
now. Yeah,
I'm actually very impressed you can do this. That's very, very impressive. I think I'll keep this in mind for next time. This is your best, the best time to invite me to talk.
Or maybe not.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Okay.
And we'll see
thank you,
soon.
everyone. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.